Welcome back, biology students. Today we're going to talk about two different types of reproduction, asexual and sexual. So you already got an introduction to these in your vocabulary lesson yesterday. Sexual reproduction requires two cells to come together to make a new organism, whereas asexual reproduction only requires one cell. First of all, we'll talk about asexual reproduction, and then we're going to go into some examples of asexual reproduction. So asexual reproduction is a form of reproduction which does not involve meiosis or fertilization. So meiosis we haven't started talking about yet, but we have talked about mitosis. Mitosis is used during asexual reproduction. Fertilization, combination of two cells, is not needed for asexual reproduction. So only one parent cell is needed. So again, I find it very important to refer to cell rather than individuals, right? Because individuals can also go through sexual reproduction by combining two of their own cells. So asexual, one cell. The primary form of reproduction for the more simple organisms, single-celled organisms such as archaebacteria, which are your extremophiles, like the ones that are found in the Dead Sea, for example, or in the volcanic vents. Any bacteria like E. coli and many of our protists like amoebas, parameciums, those little unicellular organisms that live in ponds. I'm also going to show you how some plants reproduce asexually, and this is true of fungi as well. Remember, the fungi are the mushroom. Sexual reproduction results in increasing genetic diversity. That is a bonus. It's characterized by two processes. First, you have to go through a process called meiosis, which halves the number of chromosomes. So it's considered a reduction division. So for humans, for example, we're going to go from a cell that has 46 to cells that have 23. That way, when they combine in fertilization, you're back to the original number of 46. Okay, so a combination of two gametes, so we would talk about eggs and sperm, and the restoration of the original number of chromosomes. So the 23 plus 23 equals 46 for humans. During meiosis, the chromosome usually cross over. We saw that in the vocabulary, the tangling that happens in the legs of the homologous chromosomes, and they exchange bits of genetic information, right? That's called crossing over, which increases more diversity, creating more genetic recombination. This is going to aid in the creation of new traits. It's the primary method of reproduction for the more complex organisms, those that you can see with the naked eye. So almost all plants and animals will reproduce sexually. So let's start with some types of asexual reproduction. We're going to describe them and give examples of organisms that undergo this type of asexual reproduction. You should be able to list them, describe them, and recognize examples for your test. Okay? So the first one is binary fission. We've talked about bacteria with binary fission already. It's simply dividing in two. Bi means to, fission, to split. This is an example of a paramecium, one of our protozoans, little unicellular water-dwelling organism. So it's true of bacteria. We talked about the circular DNA being replicated, connecting to the membrane, and then the membrane cleaving in between, like it is here in this paramecium. The cell splits into two identical cells, producing clones. That's a word we're going to want to use in the future, clones. Budding is another example. We mentioned this one during mitosis, actually. So budding is when an organism's cell divides unevenly. So you can see this yeast cell has these little tiny buds coming off of it, so it didn't divide into two separate cells, right? Eventually, these little buds, these outgrowths, will fall off and become living organisms themselves. We can see that over here in the hydra. So we've talked about hydra before. These little, they're water dwellers. They just kind of free float in the water. So right here you can see a cell has divided unevenly and is beginning an outgrowth of the original parent. And this piece will break off and become its own living organism. So unequal division of the cytoplasm, but genetic information will remain equal. So again, creating genetic clones. So the yeast, the hydra, also coral. Did you know that coral was an animal? So we've heard of the coral reefs. They multiply through budding as well. Sporulation, spores, are surrounded by a tough coat. They're kind of like a seed in that they have that coat around them. That coat is protecting them from harsh environmental conditions. And when conditions are right, that coat will open up and begin the process. So this occurs in molds. Here, this is a bread mold, and mosses. So we know where it's nice and moist and dark out in the woods, we have lots of mosses, and you can see the spores here and the spores here. Fragmentation is super cool. I wish we could do a lab with this in the class. Things are fragmenting, meaning breaking apart, correct? So bodies of the parent cell, or the parent as an individual. So body parts will break off and become entirely new organisms. So we can see the starfish is going to be one of our examples. And this was one of the ways I think that we discovered fragmentation. The starfish were considered pests, if you will. They were eating the shellfish. And so the fishermen would take and collect all of the starfish, chop them up into a bunch of pieces, throw them back out into the waters to protect their shellfish. The problem is all those little pieces of starfish became new starfish. So this one, you can tell that this is the original leg and a new starfish has grown from that. Another example, and we do this a lot in a lab, is the planarian. This is a flatworm. So any of these pieces, you break them or cut them and it will grow the rest of the body parts. So if you get a tail, you can grow a new head. If you get the head, you can grow a new tail. I've seen some kind of cool ones where they split them right down from between the eye spots and both grow into new heads. So you guys would like that. That would be pretty fun. So planaria, that's this flatworm. Some other flatworms like flukes and also the starfish. Vegetative propagation is one of my favorites. This may not be the best picture of vegetative propagation, but hopefully you see the word vegetable in this. And to propagate means to spread. So this is literally plants spreading. So it's the production of a new plant from a portion of another plant. These are strawberry plants. So this is very common. Strawberry plants send out runners, and then at different nodes, they'll start growing little roots, and then a new plant will grow from that point. This runner may be broken at some point. This happens if your folks have any spider plants. Those are pretty common house plants. We can grow new spider plants that way. Strawberries are good examples. Any kind of cutting, different plants will grow best from different types of cutting. So this is a mint plant that I had, and I just cut off one of its stems and put it in water. And if you'll notice at the bottom now, I have a whole bunch of new roots. So now I can plant this in the dirt or in a pot, and I'll be able to grow a new mint plant, and it smells so good. This is kind of fun. This is a celery and a couple different things happening here. I could talk about osmosis, how I put my celery in this cup of water so that my celery sticks would remain stiff instead of getting all limp and flaccid. But also check it out here at the bottom. Again, I have little roots growing from this cutting. So this is an example of vegetative propagation. So I hope you can see those little bitty roots. Kind of cool. That's one of my favorites. You'll see this common with onion roots in your refrigerator. Also potatoes. You'll notice they grow new eyes, and those eyes will grow roots. Your garlics. You can grow different types of plants from different types of cuttings. Some require a root, some require a stem, some require a leaf. So vegetative propagation, plants spreading. Hopefully you started your day talking about parthenogenesis, which is kind of cool. Parthenogenesis happens when females produce eggs, and then those eggs develop into young without ever being fertilized. And it's a little bit complicated. We won't go into the whole process that allows this to happen, but it's common in whip-tailed lizards, fish, insects, frogs, some different reptiles. You'll remember if you watched Jurassic Park at all, and they bred all of the females to be, or they bred all of their dinosaurs to be females, and that was to make sure that they didn't have any breeding. And what happened? They laid eggs and the eggs hatched, right? So when a female is without that male in its environment, sometimes it'll go through this process of parthenogenesis and produce its own eggs. So again, this is an animal. It's still going to be a clone because there was no genetic variation. Okay, we're almost done. Sexual reproduction requires 2 cells, right? Not necessarily 2 parents, but 2 cells. So what I can see here is I see a bee and a flower, and I think right away pollination is one of my 2 types of fertilization. When pollen is delivered to the female part of the plant, it might be a bee, it might be a bird, it might be a butterfly. You can do this in the lab, but you just have to get the pollen to the stamen. So this is common in flowering plants. This does create a genetic variation. Plus, as I'm looking at pros and cons. So the positive to this is that the plant doesn't have to move about and it can still mix DNA, creating variation. The negative to this, the con, would be that you need an external source for pollination. You need a wind, a butterfly, a bat, a bee, some sort of organism that will transfer the pollen for the plant. And then fertilization, we're familiar with. The DNA from 2 cells merge to form one. Here we have a little sperm breaking into the egg to combine the DNA of the sperm with the DNA of this egg. So this is common in animals and plants. A positive to this process is that it creates diverse DNA, genetic recombinations, through meiosis, through random fertilization. Any egg could fertilize any sperm, you don't know which one, and through that crossover event that happens during meiosis. The negative to this is that it takes a lot longer to happen. Asexual reproduction, super easy, don't need to find a mate, quick, simple. Fertilization takes more time, you need to find a mate, 2 individuals are needed. So it's a little bit more complicated process. So we've talked about 6 different types of asexual reproduction. You guys should be able to list them, give examples of each, and describe them. We've talked about 2 types of sexual reproduction. You should be able to describe those as well as identify the benefits and the drawbacks of the different types of reproduction. So I hope that is helpful and you guys have a great week. Bye-bye.